Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and I am excited to start off the rankings videos for the 2025 NFL Draft positional rankings videos. We're going to start with the interior defensive line today for these videos because the NFL Combine hasn't happened yet, and something that I have spent a lot of time researching, trying to figure out is which measurables, think everything at the Combine from height, weight to the 40 times, etc., are most linked to success for each position. Which ones have mathematical correlations that means that they are actually connected to, hey, a 40 time does mean something for a wide receiver, or etc., etc. And to what extent, and interior defensive line really has the least to gain in terms of changes in my rankings from what happens at the Combine. A couple of players specifically have the most to gain or lose, but just in general speaking, it's going to be the least important for this position. I do have some honorable mentions before we get into the interior defensive line here, so we're going to be going through my top 15 in this video. I'm just going to be going, as you can see on the screen, really just trying to hone in on like one strength, one weakness, then I have a little bit of a write-up to go into a little bit more detail about the player, let you just get introduced to these guys, and give you my draft grade on them. All these things can still change to some extent, but I'm pretty, fairly well dialed in. I don't have the complete list done. Let's just get into this. Let's just start with the honorable mentions. I'll talk about a couple of other things here. So, J.J. Pegs, I think it is, or Pegways, of Ole Miss, C.J. West of Indiana, Tim Smith of Alabama are all guys who are just on the outside of my top 15 list, as well as some guys who I currently have in my edge rankings. But NFL teams, at least some, may think of them as interior defensive linemen. Heck, I might even think of some of them as interior defensive linemen. And those are guys like Shamar Turner, who I personally fear is more of a tweener than a hybrid player. Just a little bit into my mind, tweener, hybrid player kind of means the same thing, but one has more of a positive connotation, the other one negative, tweener being on the more negative side, hybrid being more of a positive side. So I fear that he might be more of a tweener than a hybrid, just meaning I'm a little bit lost on exactly where to put Shamar Turner for his best chance of success. I do understand the hype on him, though. It's easy to understand that. And then there's a guy like Landon Jackson who's in the same boat as Shamar Turner, and Jordan Birch is another name, little less of a popular name, less high up on the drafts. However, I know that I prefer Jordan Birch at edge, so there isn't really any question for me there. Regardless, Jordan has the ability to kick inside on sub-packages where you're not afraid of the run. Think like a 3rd and 20 situation where all you're trying to do is pass rush the quarterback with your 3 or 4 guys. That's how those guys go out. Shamar Turner's actually kind of in the same boat as a Jordan Birch in terms of likelihood of what their role will be. And then I think Landon Jackson, to me, actually could be the opposite. But we'll see, because currently the NFL is treating him like an edge, despite some signs to say otherwise. But most signs point towards that's where they're treating him. Additionally, the NFL Stock Exchange, a YouTube channel that I've plugged before, very good, love those guys, had Elijah Roberts, Jamari Caldwell, and Shamar Turner in their top 15s list. Literally, I was about a half hour out from finishing this prep for this video when the NFL Stock Exchange came out with their top 15 list, which I listened to last night, and now I'm recording this the next day. Of those names, Elijah Roberts, Jamari Caldwell, Shamar Turner, Jamari Caldwell, I know about him, and I'm very interested in finding out more about him, and I have a very incomplete day 2 grade on him right now, so it's likely that he'll move into my top 15 as well. I just don't have enough on him yet. Same story for Elijah Roberts, and then Shamar Turner. Although Elijah Roberts I currently have in the edge class, so I might have to rework where I have him placed. I don't know. And then Shamar Turner, I've heard the buzz about, but I'm not buzzing about him myself yet. So we'll see on him. But there is a list of like 15 to 20 even names yet on the interior defensive line that I have yet to be able to get much further than the baseline on, trouble finding tape, etc., that I would like to get further in. So Jamari Caldwell, one of those names. All that to say that I have not completed the position yet. That's going to be true of all of these. Especially considering these positions before we get to Indianapolis, before the Combine has even begun. Some of the names in this top 15 list will probably end up being in the top 20, not the top 15, because some of those names that I haven't gotten to yet will surprise and will make their way up here, and especially those 2 names that I talked about that I really have interest in are on their way towards being in the top 15. Links in the description to my top 50 rankings big board are available. My website where my big mock drafts are available, as well as my big board. And you can see the big board up on my Discord channel, where there is a link in the description there as well. And up on the Discord channel soon, if not already, you can find my strengths, weaknesses, notes of all players at every position that I have scouted so far. And those lists will continue to be updated over the coming months as we approach the draft. Without further ado, let's get on to my number 15 interior defensive lineman in Rylie Mills, 6'5", 295 pounds. He is an odd front defensive end, B-gapper, 4-eye. Basically, you're going to hear me talk about the 3-eye tech a lot here. They're kind of your most likely position that a lot of these interior defensive linemen are going to be playing at, covering the B-gap. A little bit more specific here on Rylie Mills, because he's a little bit more specific of a player. He's a powerful man. You will see him throw grown-ass men to the ground with ease when he, quote-unquote, gets there, whether that be in the run or in the pass. He does a great job to finish plays. Typically, he wins the pass rush with a pure bull rush, meaning he wins with his strength. However, you will see him toss in some finesse here and there with the occasional swim or rip move, which has served him well when he does those. Still, the finesse aspect of the game is his biggest weakness. He's very much a north to south player. He lacks range and hip flex to get lateral. He does not have a very quick first step. He's not incredibly explosive. Currently, I have a late 4th to early 5th round draft grade on him. By the way, I have gone through and tweaked some of these draft grades on these players as I went through this process. I realized some of these guys, maybe my grade was a little bit off. So Rylie Mills was somebody who, as I read through all the notes that I made for him, I was like, that sounds more like a 5th round guy. So I kind of met myself in the middle there. 4th, 5th round is where I currently have him. I'm going to watch tapes on these guys a second time, and when I do that, then I'll lock in exactly where I have him, and maybe it will be right here as a 4.5, 4th, 5th round kind of guy. And that does put me a little bit higher on him than the consensus currently is. Part of the reason for that is that he does make some impressive plays with his strength, and I think that there's an outside chance that he could be a playmaker at the next level, an impact kind of guy. The issue is that pure strength rarely translates from college to the NFL. Everyone in the NFL is either very strong or they know how to handle strength. They have the technique down to do that. And he isn't a guy who gets leverage on his side, as I talked about his lack of hip flex, etc. He's already an older prospect, so hopefully he has started doing yoga classes already. He needs to get more flexible so that he can put his strength in situations where it can win. Chris Jones is the impossible, to hit high ceiling for a guy like Rylie Mills. My point being that when a guy like Rylie Mills hits, it can be special. And I'm not saying he could be Chris Jones special. I mean, I'm not saying he can't be. Obviously, it's not likely, though, is my point there. But he is one of these guys where, if he was 3 years younger, I think we'd be a little bit more excited about the potential. But once again, hopefully he's getting in there, doing some work to just get a little bit more flexible. That could be really important for his game. That's going to bring us on to my number 14 interior defensive lineman currently of this class, and Simeon Barrow Jr. of Miami, 6'3", 291 pounds. You see that little asterisk at the end of the pound sign there, at the end of his weight, and that just means that those measurements, the 6'3", 291 pounds, are not official, and that's important because a lot of these guys have their measurements are beefed up while they're in college, and then they get the official measurements and they're lower. So keep that in mind. I try not to look at those measurements too much until they're official. Simeon Barrow is a dog. He's built like a fire hydrant with an ultra compact frame. He's maxed out in the sense of his frame. I don't think he's putting on any more weight. He plays with a high motor and he can contribute on all downs and on special teams. He's got 2 blocked kicks in 2024, so that's always exciting. And something that stood out to me that is a bit of a concern is that despite having pretty nice production numbers, a good chunk of it came as a result of cleanup duties or even sometimes just kind of luck plays falling into his lap. Currently, I have a 4th round draft grade on him, which is high compared to consensus. I see Simeon as a fairly safe floor, low ceiling type of plug-and-play prospect. He can come in year 1 and contribute on special teams, while also contributing as a part of the rotation along the defensive line as the season progresses. From there, I see him having a long, successful career in the NFL, never the centerpiece of a defense, but one of those players that the fans of the team know and appreciate, his contribution to the defensive line. That's going to bring us on to my number 13 interior defensive lineman, Aeneas Peebles of Virginia Tech. I don't know if I pronounced that Aeneas Peebles. I gotta think it's Peebles though. 6'1.5", 289 pounds. He's your typical B-gap defensive tackle, 3-tech kind of guy. And Aeneas is a relentless and polished pass rusher, evidenced by his 17.7% pass rush win rate in 2024 and his 54 hurries, 6 hits, and 9 sacks over the past 2 years. His overall size, most notably his short arms, will give teams pause, might even be off of some teams' boards, and that doesn't help the draft stock. However, in my research, I haven't found a strong statistical correlation between height and arm length to players' productions. Nonetheless, he's on the small side, and generally speaking, bigger, faster, stronger is what we want the most in the NFL. I did end up pushing him just a little bit back in my rankings. I have a late 3rd to early 4th round draft grade on him, which is a touch higher than consensus. Consensus has him in the 4th round currently. Generally speaking, you cannot go wrong with following the ideology of bigger, faster, stronger. It typically will work out in the long run. A bet on Aeneas Peebles falls short in terms of the bigger portion of that. But he showed me that he has the drive to make it at the next level. At the end of the second day of practice at the Senior Bowl, he was matched up against Gray Zabel for what I call last rep honors. Just basically at the end of practice, at a few different positions, they give guys the last rep of the day to show off guys who impressed during that day of practice, had a good day. Gray Zabel, the guy opposite of him for his last rep, if you're not aware, most say was the most dominant player at Senior Bowl practices. He was on fire, was having a great time. And although Peebles did lose his rep against Gray Zabel, he fought his butt off, and he earned my respect. He really, really fought hard. Ultimately, the reason that I'm willing to be a little bit higher on Peebles comes down to the fact that I think that he has 3-down upside. I think that he is a good enough run defender that you can rely on him, especially as he, develops a little bit more. That's going to bring us on to my number 12 prospect on the interior defensive line, Deone Walker, or I call him D1 Walker, just so I remember how to spell it. But Deone Walker, 6'7", 340 pounds. That's official. He is a big man, and he is versatile. And I have it versatile, ... nose tackle, ? Yeah, he doesn't necessarily have a home, and that's part of the problem here. It's great that he's versatile, though. So, strength here, his size, his arm length, that's obvious. He looks big when he's amongst a bunch of other big people. That's when you know you've truly got a big person. He is definitely going to be a space eater, but his game IQ and the ability to play anywhere across the defensive line are going to be very enticing aspects for teams to want to draft him and want to draft him highly. As it often is the case with guys that are this size, his conditioning is a concern. He clearly fatigues as games wear on, and then he gets lazy and he stops dominating. Will he ever be a 3-down player is going to be one of the concerns. And I want to get back to the other concern there, the versatility nose tackle issue with the question mark at nose tackle is just like, you want to see this guy dominate at nose tackle, and frankly, we didn't see that. So I'll get into that here. Currently, I have a late 3rd to 4th round draft grade on him, which is lower than the near top 50 player that he currently is via consensus. He has a lot working for him, and he very well may go in the 2nd round. It wouldn't be a shock. He is very young, and when the NFL season begins, he still won't be able to have a drink. He's still going to be 20 years old at the beginning of the season. He did very well at the Senior Bowl, and word is that he's incredibly likable. He's a good locker room guy who should interview well. He has a lot working for him. However, when I watched him, I was left wanting more. I was disappointed. And ultimately, that's why I've got this 3rd, 4th round draft grade on him. There's so much working for him, yet it just doesn't come together. And, I don't know if I could trust him at nose tackle. But he also has that moldable clay type of thing that people could latch onto. For him, he's just not a finished product yet. that's going to bring us on to Jordan Phillips, who is 6'1", 318 pounds, coming out of Maryland, and he is a true nose tackle, and we can trust him there. His background in wrestling comes through on tape in both his hand fighting and his extra wide stance, something that will immediately stand out to you if you watch his tape. As you would imagine, that gives him the advantage in the leverage game because he gets low. Add to that he is rocked up and explosive, and you have a guy who does make some plays. There are some unique things about Jordan Phillips, however, when you watch his tape that stand out. And the most unique and funny thing to me, but potentially harmful aspect of his game tendency, is the fact that he literally hops sometimes. Sometimes it does work, but multiple times during the same rep even. It's pretty funny when you just see a guy hopping along the defensive line. It's very odd. But as you would imagine, leaving your base wide open, no leverage, can result in absolutely getting launched and or landing on your own ass. Neither of which puts you in a good position to make a play. You can't make a play when you're in midair throughout most of the play or on the ground throughout the play, unless that play happens to fall into your lap. So, those are concerns for Jordan Phillips that could really, really hurt his game and make him unreliable out there. But currently, I have a late third to early fourth round draft grade on Jordan Phillips as well, which is directly in line with consensus. I'm in agreement. Oh, by the way, you might not get this. Hip hop anonymous. Oh my gosh, hold up. I forgot to make myself a little, I was going to put a little border around it, but we've gotten this far in the video and it's been that ugly and I was that small in the corner. Whatever. This is, I think, the furthest out that I have any wording, so I think we'll be safe that I won't be covering up anything on the slideshow. But hip hop. I have the hop underlined because, he hops. Hip hop anonymous line comes from the great movie Big Daddy, right? Big Daddy? 90s, might be before your time, but go check it out if you ever get the chance. It's a great, funny movie. All right. I don't know how well it's aged. Too bad. Currently, I have a late third to early fourth round draft grade on him, which is directly in line with consensus. He's only 20 years old. He loves football and reading and not much else. He's already a good pass rusher with a 10.5% pass rush win rate in 2024, but he's still raw. He's largely been able to win thanks to his physical and athletic abilities and, some of those traits that he learned in wrestling. Adding some pass rush moves to his repertoire will go a long way. He's a developmental prospect who can come in and contribute as part of a rotation on day one, in part thanks to his versatility. His best role will be as a nose tackle, but he can line up anywhere between the tackles and help. He can be effective there. The confidence level in him developing has to be high. He is a student of the game, and he further proved that by winning the Pat Tillman Award at the East-West Shrine Bowl, which is an award given to the most outstanding player throughout the entirety of the practices. He is a candidate to move up in my rankings when I re-review the position after the combine. I don't know for sure if he will or not, but I just want to point out, there's a lot to like about him and a lot to like the trajectory that he is on. And, I expect that he will take well to coaching. And once again, that Pat Tillman Award goes a long ways towards proving that. So that's going to bring us on to my number 10 interior defensive lineman here, Darius Alexander of Toledo, 6'3.5", 304 pounds. By the way, I have everything rounded to halves, so 6'3", 6'3.5", 6'4". Nothing's going to end up being in between. I just round up or down a little ways. But Darius Alexander of Toledo, B-gap kind of guy, 3-tech, with the versatility to kick further inside. He can play anywhere from the 4-eye to the 2-eye. I would say that's basically anywhere off guard to off tackle, or whichever way it goes. So when we look at Darius Alexander coming out of Toledo, he has the NFL size, and with 55 hurries, 17 hits, and 11 sacks, and 6 batted passes over the past 2 years, he's proven that he can produce at that level of football at the very least. Toledo, remember? And when we look at the weaknesses here, sometimes he takes a false step. His footwork needs help. His reaction time to the snap is great, but the false step causes him to appear slow off of the snap. If you're not aware, a false step is when a player does not push off of their loaded foot. So when you're lined up, usually you have one foot ahead of the other, and your weight is on that front foot, and then you push off of that front foot immediately at the snap. A false step means you take a step, you load off of that foot, and then you go, loading. You get your power going through your legs, through your core, up, and through your arms. All of that Takes much longer when you take that false step, and that time allows the offensive lineman to react, act, get engaged before you're prepared, all of those things, and that's obviously very costly. So you want to cut that process down, shorten it, and those false steps is a tendency that a lot of people have that you got to cut out. Currently, I have a 3rd round draft grade on Darius Alexander, which is close to consensus, but I am maybe a touch lower on him by not much. When a player comes from a conference like the Mid-American Conference, where he comes from, your immediate concern is about the level of competition that they faced. And that makes events like the Senior Bowl incredibly important for a guy like Darius Alexander, and he passed that interview. He had a great Senior Bowl. In addition to that, he has shown steady year-over-year improvement through his time at college. Once again, that's that trajectory. You love to see a forward-moving trajectory. You love to see guys improving year-over-year. And we know that he has the NFL size. So the main question is how high is this guy's ceiling? And some of his weaknesses can be coached out, talking about that false step, but others cannot. I think his ability to climb up into the 2nd round or fall back into day 3 depends on how well he can convince teams that he loves the game of football. He took plays off too often in college. What's going to be different at the next level that he's not going to do that? That's going to be an important answer for him to have throughout this process and will determine a lot of his fate. That's going to bring us on to my number 9 interior defensive lineman. This may be a surprise to many of you if you're familiar with the draft and the consensus rankings. And that's going to be Tyleik Williams, 6'3", 327 pounds. He's a versatile nose tackle, and this time I say that in a good sense. He can play anywhere along the defensive line. Home base going to be your nose tackle spot. Currently, I have a late 2nd to early 3rd round draft grade on him, and that's low. He is currently the 40th ranked player on the consensus big board, so you figure I am saying I have a late 50s to early 70s kind of draft grade on him, to about 70. So there's obviously a discrepancy between my ranking and the common consensus ranking. I believe that the strengths and weaknesses listed on the screen there tell you a lot of the story for Tyleik Williams. Yes, he's got this raw energy and power to him that is a very exciting and good to have. But he's also quite raw still, and a lot of his game is based on power. So there's a ways to go here moving forward for me. Based on what I saw on tape too, I wasn't incredibly impressed, and I wanted to see more from a guy who's thought of so highly. He's a toolsy prospect, but he lacks a lot of nuance, polish, and game IQ. I very well might be higher on him when all is said and done, but I need to see what he does at the Combine. This is one of those guys who I'm really looking out for at the Combine. Apparently, he was plagued by an early season injury that throughout the season, and he's plagued by that. And that happens. So we'll see where he ends up on draft day for me. That's going to bring us on to my number 8 interior defensive lineman, TJ Sanders, coming out of South Carolina. Typical B-gap defensive tackle, 3-tech kind of guy, 6'4", 284 pounds. His first step is explosive, and he has a nasty lateral move that he can pull off at the snap. He has fluid hips that allow him to take advantage of his field vision and awareness when helping in pursuit. From sideline to sideline, he can help in pursuit. When we look at the weaknesses, getting knocked on your butt is probably the worst thing that can happen to someone that plays along either side of the line, defensive or offensive line, and Sanders has some tendencies that will land him on his butt far too often in the NFL. First, he needs to work on his footwork, mostly because he gets too narrow in his stance. He's got to keep his feet wider and in a more athletic stance, keep that base in a position where he's not just going to get so easily knocked back. Second is that he plays flat-footed when he puts two hands in the dirt. And when you do that, you put yourself at risk here. He's going to get absolutely blasted into a stratosphere if or when he plays up against an aggressive offensive lineman that sees that. They're just going to come quickly engage him. He's going to get caught flat-footed and get knocked back and be useless on the play. That is something that needs to get fixed. Currently, I have a second-round draft grade on him, which is a touch high compared to consensus, but pretty close. Aside from a couple of coachable concerns, those things are coachable. TJ Sanders is a very complete player who can pitch in both as a pass rusher and against the run. He should be a 3-down player, but he does tend to get gassed late game. That's our final concern here. So hopefully a better conditioning program will help his stamina. Going to bring us on to my number 7 interior defensive lineman in Omarr Norman-Lott of Tennessee, who is 6'2", 295 pounds. He's your typical 3-eye, 3-tech, I should say, B-gap defensive tackle who can kick outside of the tackle in certain sub-packages, meaning you can put him all the way out into the edge. Once again, in a situation like a 3rd and 20 type of situation, you're not afraid of the run. You want to get all your pass rushers out there. You can kick him out. He utilizes both his upper body strength and his lower body power to bully offensive linemen. Combine that with his lightning quick first step, and you get a guy who had a pass rush win rate of 18.8% last year. He is absolutely elite at getting to the quarterback. He does tend to forget that there are other things that you need to do in this game than getting to the quarterback. His gap integrity is an issue. He's a bit one-track minded, and there's more to the game than just winning your rep every single time and getting to the quarterback. Because, sometimes the team runs the ball. Currently, I have a 2nd-round draft grade on him, which makes me only a little bit higher than consensus on him, and I like him a lot. So, glad to see that he is pretty well thought of. Tennessee had a full rotation along their defensive line, so there's definitely some projection when you look at a guy like Omarr Norman-Lott. Looking forward. To me, he is the Braden Fisk of this draft. He was doing really well on day 1 at the Senior Bowl before getting injured at the Senior Bowl and then missing the rest of the practices and the game. I think that his stock was about to skyrocket, but that does add to the concerns about how many plays and games that you will actually get from this guy, how available he'll actually be for you. He had an injury history in a heavy rotation, and then he gets injured at practice in the Senior Bowl. Availability matters, so if we see him fall in the draft, I think that availability is going to be certainly a big reason why we see him maybe not go in the 2nd round. That could be the case. That's going to bring us on to my number 6 interior defensive lineman in Joshua Farmer of Florida State. Typical 3-eye defensive tackle, B-gap, 6'3", 314 pounds. And the man is built, and when he shoots the gap, he is like a cannonball, just getting shot right out. Nobody is going to be able to stop that. At his best, he has the ability to absolute wreck plays with brutal force. However, he's not the same guy on a down-in and down-out basis, and frankly, he wasn't a game changer anywhere near enough. Currently, I am high on him with a 2nd-round draft grade, significantly higher on him than consensus, and I will openly, put out there Daniel Jeremiah's thoughts on him. I read those, saw those prior to getting to him first, so they could have influenced my openness to liking him. But he also did impress at the Senior Bowl practices. He earned a last rep honor on one of those days. At the end of the day, I think that the interview process is going to be the make or break portion of the process for Joshua. How does he explain away his lack of consistency? Regardless, at his best, he is a demon for offensive lines to have to deal with, and you love to have a guy who offensive lines are not happy to see on the other side of the ball. That's going to bring us to my number 5 interior defensive lineman in Alred Collins, 6'5", 320 pounds, unconfirmed. He is a versatile defensive lineman who I felt brings the juice when he was lined up in the A-gap the most. And the A-gap's going to be anywhere from the 2-eye to the 0 even, right over center, your nose tackle kind of position. But once again, anywhere along the defensive line, he can be aligned. He's a really smart player. He diagnoses plays well. He maintains his gap. He's not going to be the guy that other teams are afraid of. He does a great job of disengaging from blocks. He always has his feet moving, and when needed, he can anchor very well. When he's not able to get there, because of his field awareness, he gets his hands up, and that resulted in 6 batted passes in 2024. When it comes to his weakness, I wrote production, and this is what a lot of people are going to be pointing to. A poor production profile is what they're going to say. And it is true that on fewer total snaps, he had more pressures in 2023 than he did in 2024. However, he was far less involved overall in 2023, and he was also utilized as much more of a rotational pass rusher in 2023, and by that I mean a much higher percentage of his complete total downs played were in pass rush situations, or on passing downs, I should say. Fast forward to 2024, and he had a lot more duties on his plate. His snaps during rushing plays over doubled. Meanwhile, his pass rush snaps only went up by 1.5 times. The fact of the matter is that, yes, he could have been more of a nuisance. He still made a larger impact, however, on a down-in and down-out basis in 2024 than he had in 2023, over tripling his tackle production. And tackles aren't everything, don't get me wrong, but it says a lot about how he was utilized. When you break down his production by pass rush snaps and rushing play snaps, and you look at separately what they can get out of the production on those types of snaps, his production was fine when you compare it to others around him. Once again, that doesn't mean it was spectacular, but it was fine. He was asked to do a lot more in 2024, things that he had never been asked to do, and yet he still improved overall. To say that he has a poor profile, I think, is not looking a little bit deeper at what he did and what he was asked to do. Then, when we look at what I think of him, I've got a second-round draft grade on him, which is just a touch higher than consensus. People do like Alred Collins. As a fifth-year senior, he does not come into the league as a young man anymore, but he improved each and every year that he was given an opportunity to play. And I think that he showed that he can come in and he can contribute at a high level at the next level by the end of his first season. I think that he'll be a contributor for years to come then following that. He's a high-floor meat and potatoes player, and you cannot have your dessert without your meat and potatoes. And what I mean by that is you bring a bunch of Ferraris out there on every single down, and those Ferraris are they're going to get locked up. You need the meat and potatoes in order to help open things up, give some room, give the lanes for those Ferraris to operate in. And Alred Collins is that. He's your meat and potatoes. He's going to work very well. Once again, like I said, high floor guy. I really like him a lot, and I think I don't want to oversell it, but I think that he's a very solid pick. That's going to bring us on to my number 4 prospect here at the position, Derrick Harmon, 6'5", 310 pounds, unconfirmed, so we'll see what his actual height and weight is. Now, when it comes to his strength, 43 hurries, 7 hits, 5 sacks. That's in 2024. That's 55 total pressures, by the way. And if you remember, I've quoted a couple of other numbers, and those numbers for those players sounded pretty similar to that 43, 7, 5 number I just quoted. However, those numbers were over 2 years. This is 1 year for Derrick Harmon, so he is an absolute disruptive force, I should say. And when it comes to the weaknesses, so he disrupts the play, that's great. He's absolutely horrible at tackling. He does not finish plays very well. I will take a guy who regularly blows plays up, gets pressure, and doesn't finish, but you would prefer that they did finish. Currently, I have an early to mid, we'll say, second-round draft grade on him. I just don't have him quite into the late first round. I don't think is worth it, but the minute we get into the second round, or maybe at pick 31, 32, totally fine with picking him. And that's basically on par with consensus. He's a 3-down player who's going to ball out for you. He had his best games of the year in some of the biggest games of the year. And that's something that you like to see. That's something that scouts do pay attention to. He killed it versus Ohio State twice. He killed it versus Boise State, versus Michigan, against his previous school, Michigan State, and in the season opener. Penn State was really the only big game where he did not show up. All the others, those were games that had extra meaning. The opening game of the season, when you play the team that you previously played on, those games have all bigger meaning. And then, of course, Michigan, Boise State, Ohio State, good teams. That's going to bring us on to Kenneth Grant here, my number 3 prospect, 6'3.5", 342 pounds. That is confirmed. And he's a nose tackle, defensive tackle. You can kind of play him anywhere. Really, between the guards is where you want him the most, though. The story does not end as his size. You see his strength, weakness. He big. He's a big man. I mean, look at that, 342 pounds on his less than 6'4" frame. He wears that weight really well, by the way. And the real story of him is how well this man can move laterally. He has great range, and not for his size. He has great range at his size. He has great range for Indy's size, but he has a really big size and he's rangy. It's truly impressive to see just how great of an athlete that Kenneth Grant is. And I would liken him to being the Chris Farley of football. For you younger folks, if you don't know who Chris Farley is, he's a comedian from the 90s. And now you say, why would I compare a guy to a comedian? Well, Chris Farley was a football player in college. He played at the University of Wisconsin, so, a fairly celebrated college school, Big Ten school. And he comes from that background, and he used his athleticism in his comedy a lot. He was a very physical comedian, and everybody to a T that hung out with knew Chris Farley will tell you, and you can see it in a lot of his comedy, just how athletic this guy was. For a guy his size, it was very, truly impressive, and the same thing can be said for Kenneth Grant. By the way, Chris Farley, go look up his movies, watch them. Great stuff. 90s. A couple of 90s references today. That's bring us on to Kenneth Grant's weakness. Once again, he's big. Reportedly, he's had issues maintaining his weight. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do trust the source that I heard it from. Not some secret source. I just don't recall where I heard it, which could, of course, spell trouble. That's never a great thing if a guy's struggling with his weight, whether that be either way. That could spell trouble for him in the long term at any point, really. So currently, I do have a first-round draft grade on him. He'll be 21 when the NFL season begins, so he's still young. He's a specimen, and I'm very close to having him ranked higher than Walter Nolen, who I love. You should know that. Walter Nolen's definitely my guy. They're neck and neck right now, and if it wasn't for the concerns about his weight maintenance, I would probably have him ahead of Walter Nolen, who's obviously going to be my number 2 prospect. And the main reason is that bigger is better, and this man is big. Size is a predictor towards success along the defensive line. So, a lot to really like about Kenneth Grant. Going to bring us on to my number 2 prospect here in Walter Nolen of Ole Miss. He's your typical versatile interior defensive lineman. He can pretty much line up anywhere. You can even kick him out to the edge, even though he's never been... Well, he might have been an edge rusher when he was younger. I can't quite recall his history on that one. But 6'3", 293 pounds, that is confirmed. And I will talk more about his upside shortly, but I really want to point out his ability to just absolutely dismantle and destroy double teams. It's fantastic. He eats them for breakfast. And when you have a guy taking up 2 resources along that line, that obviously opens up everything else. And not only does he use up those resources, but he can make them a waste by beating them. So that's really, really important that Walter Nolen has that ability to do that. He needs to get his hands in check, however, in order to help be more consistent. His handwork is an issue, and it's not a problem of strength. When he gets his hands on guys and in the right spots, it's an impact. He has an impact on the game, a positive impact from his strong hands. The issue is that he's not very good at getting them in the right place at the right time. He doesn't do either of those things very great. So he needs to work on his timing and placement in order to help him take that next step, which will be very important, especially when you want him playing right along the nose tackle and everything, having heavy hands, having the handwork, the strong hands to fight is very important in the trenches. The more you get down into the trenches, the more important it is. Currently, I have a first-round draft grade on him. That's in line with consensus. And in short, to give you an idea of what kind of impact Walter Nolen can have, and I don't use that word lightly when I talk about an impact player, guys who truly impact the game on a regular basis, he's one of those guys who could do that. And he is the guy this year that some people say the name Aaron Darnold when they're, trying to do a comp for him or something. And I think ultimately what people are trying to say when they use a comp like that is not like, oh man, he's the next Aaron Darnold. Although he said that himself. So that comp's not going away anytime soon because people just quote the fact that he said it himself. But the fact of the matter is that he has the potential to be a true down in and down out impact player, really affect the game in a strong way, much like Aaron Donald was. To that level in the same exact way, probably not. Obviously, you can never expect that from any kind of player, that kind of production, but I do have a high ceiling for Walter Nolen, and so do others, and, ultimately, high ceilings are very important to have on your team. And that's going to bring us to Mason Graham, number 1 interior defensive lineman on my board, on most boards, 6'3", 320 pounds, unconfirmed. He's a 3-tech, B-gapping D-tackle. He does have some versatility, but let's just keep him at home for the most part because he's near elite at what he does. His abilities in the run game are elite. So we're talking about the overall game, near elite. What he does best, it is elite. And as I watched him, I was amazed at the fact that he almost never seemed to actually be locked down in a block. the blocker was almost always at his whim. Did he want to continue holding on to the blocker? They were at his whim. Did he want to disengage from the block, get rid of him? They're at his whim. He was able to do that at a moment's notice. He's built like a fire hydrant, and he utilizes his natural power and quick first step to stay ahead in all aspects of the game. When it comes to the weaknesses, though, it's his pass rush upside. His pass rushing was very, very good in college, but it does appear to be a little bit limited, and ultimately he may be more of a disruptor than a finisher. We just talked about a guy like that as a pass rusher. And so that just takes a little bit of the upside off of him. He's not the complete player. Not that he can't become a complete player. For sure he can. But there's just, that little sliver missing from his game. Not going to hold that against him too much. I still think he's a top 5 type of player. That's the grade that I have on him. And that's in line with consensus this year. He is one of those guys who dominated at the college level. He projects really well. There's very few questions on him. And you just expect him to succeed at the next level. And that's why you're going to see him go high in drafts. So that is it for my interior defensive line rankings. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know. And it looks like I'm probably going to do running backs next. I'm trying to do the positions where the results of the combine are going to be the least important before the combine. Then it's going to take a little while before I can get back to doing positional videos because I'm going to take in everything from the combine and start to do reassessments of my rankings. But thank you very, very much for staying tuned. Let me know who you agree with, who you disagree with. Personally, prefer to hear why. Hey, I'm not going to get everything right. So your opinions matter, and I love to hear them. And that's how we learn and get better, by sharing these opinions with one another. So take care, guys. Once again, I appreciate you. So if you made it this far in the video, please give it a like. That always helps. Bye-bye.